What's up guys, I'm ImSidVicious and this is my week 2 build update for the Ice Spear Freezing Pulse Hierophant totem build. For the first week I played a full glass cannon setup hitting around 100 million DPS, more than enough to do Ubers. Things like Cortex, Eater, and even Sears are very doable. The harder Ubers like Maven or Uber Elder still require a little bit of skill, and most of the time we can phase skip Exarch. But overall, the build has been a powerhouse. But now I've transitioned into a tankier variant, and this video covers all the changes, the gear swaps, the alternate setups, and thoughts around building survivability without giving up too much power. Okay, let's get into the foundation of this tank setup, and this basically is done through block capping and crit immunity, and we still have our layers of curse immunity, and we add a little bit of chaos mitigation. So the core items for this is the new shield, which is the Azades crest, and we combine this with Viridi's veil. Now, what the shield does is it makes the effects of lucky and unlucky roll 3 times instead of 2. And this synergizes really well with Viridi's veil because it makes enemies hitting us unlucky as long as we have a magic ring equipped. And what we do is we use a magic ring also on our left ring socket, or should I say ring slot, and this gives us also crit immunity. So these two work hand in hand to give us a pretty good layer of defense. We want to get the extra roll on block because it definitely helps us reach block cap. Together, this combo gives us huge mitigation without relying on Flask too much, but we do need roomies to get to that block cap for the moment. Now, the ring that we chose to use as our magic ring is an amethyst ring. I got this for 3 divines because it had fractured T1 life, and I just alteration spammed until I got T1 chaos resistance. On top of that, I added some resistance catalyst to reach around 39% chaos resistance total. It's not completely capped, but this has been pretty good for most mapping situations. We can try to get completely to 75%, but I left it at this as I, for most part, did not see too much of an issue, and I was running, extra damage taken as chaos altars on the Exarch. Okay, let's talk about what I did with the passive tree, and pretty much with the passive tree I picked up a bunch of block nodes. So starting with like arcane guarding, which gives us some spell block, mystic bulwark, which gives us spell block, safeguard, which gives us some spell block, and then we worked our way down to sanctuary to give us some attack block and some spell block. And to get some additional spell block, we went with this amulet called Stone of Laswar, and this gives us 15% chance to spell block, and we got this corrupted for an additional 5% chance to spell block. We also anointed this with As the Mountain. This is what you want to use until you swap to a different anoint, but with this Azades shield, this is the anoint that you want to use, and this is going to help you get to that block. We also added a reckless defense to our jewel. This will give us additional 6% chance to spell block and attack block, which is really nice, helps us reach that block cap. On top of it, we also added roomies, which we kind of need temporarily as reaching the block cap. We also added Ralakesh boots. You want to make sure you get these to count as having maximum frenzy charges, because we already have power and endurance charges. I did get these corrupted with 100 life per second while moving. It's nice just to move around and get some additional HP. Not bad for mapping at all. And as for the rest of the gear, we pretty much are keeping it the same. We still have our Sublime Vision, which gives us curse immunity. We still have our Watcher side, which gives us a little bit of extra damage. And we still have Rain of Splinters and Self-Flagellation. That gives us some more damage as well. As for our ring, we're still using Anathemas, even though we can only utilize 3 curses instead of 4. It's still nice for single target damage whenever we do need it. Now, for shield alternatives, if you don't want to use Azadi's Crest, you can use a Shaper Shield with increased block. This is going to help you reach block cap much easier. You can also get it with reduced crit damage taken, and then that way you can use some masteries on your skill tree to get crit immune, and that way it opens up your helmet slot to do something else like Heat Shiver for more DPS, or you could just get another rare helmet and get some more chaos resistance this way. And this also opens up your ring slot to be rare, so you could get a better ring, not just chaos resistance in life. You could get some attributes as well. Now, the nice thing about the Shaper Shield is it actually comes with a +1 totem mod. So this is another way to just increase your damage. Getting an extra totem is very strong. It's just going to add a ton of damage. It's a multiplier, so that is something you can look for as well. Now, of course, the final form of the tank setup. If we're using a shield, the best shield in the game right now is Svalinn. Lucky Block is almost borderline immortal. And what we also do with this setup is we use an impossible escape near blood magic. This allows us to allocate as the mountain and the surrounding block nodes, which then allows us to use a new anoint for Wall of Steel. Then we can also drop a couple of spell block in, and that gives us some extra passive points, and this allows us to hit 90% block chance and 91% spell block. And if we want, we can raise our max block a little bit further with the block mastery, giving us some more EHP. And Svalinn is just extremely strong, just allowing us to tank so many hits, especially single target hits. It's going to allow us to tank a bunch, and it makes mapping a complete breeze. Now, the thing about block to understand is, as if anything does go through your block, your EHP is then taken into account, and sometimes you will get one-shotted, but for the most part, the block is going to protect you against most things. Now, in this setup, we have a couple of Flask options. We don't need to use roomies anymore. This opens up a Flask slot, and of course, if you want to become more tanky, you can just run Progenesis. This is going to be great for mapping. It's going to increase your EHP by a lot. It's going to make mapping easier, pretty much. Now, there's an additional option. So, from my testing, what I've noticed is with the tanky setup, our DPS is a little low. We can pretty much, do a lot of things, but for the fun aspect, the new Flask is absolutely insane. Wine of the Prophet. So I haven't looked into it too much until now, and this is going to be my next thing that I want to upgrade. And it's just an incredible Flask. Basically, what it allows you to do is randomly draw cards, and you get the buff effect of what the card draws. And for our build, a lot of these cards are going to be super helpful. A lot of the cards come with cast speed, they come with extra projectiles, they come with damage, Soul Eater. It's just going to be really good for the build. It's something I haven't tested, but I think it's going to be a lot better for mapping, and I think it's going to be a lot more fun as well. So this is something that I'm looking to upgrade and test out on my build. Now, one thing that I do want to talk about is our totems themselves and the survivability of our totems. So one change I did was I did go into the totem mastery wheel and I picked up totem life and elemental res for our totems. This just allows our totems to live a lot longer, and it just helps out our DPS, it helps out our clear. It's just really nice to make sure our totems are up more often, so then that way, you know, we can continuously deal damage. We still have some extra sockets that we can use. I still have my cast on death set up from my glass cannon, so you know those sockets can be used for something like Vol RF, decoy totem. You can also use Vol Haste, you could use Sigil of Power, you can use Frost Shield. There are a couple different things you can do with this. I also use a automated setup for Arcane Cloak, and this just gives us some additional defensive layers. You could instead also do cast when damage taken. I kind of talk about this in the build video, my first build video, with all the different options of what kind of skills to use. Now, the one thing that I haven't talked about yet is the wand setup. Now, when I switched to this build, I just picked up a random wand that was good enough, just high spell damage, crit, and cast speed, and I think it had a +1 as well to cold spells, and this was around like 4 divines, and you know this is pretty good. Like, it was like a pretty cheap one, but we have a lot of room to grow here. We could definitely go for +2, and there aren't any +2 in the market currently, so we would have to craft one for our cold plus spell +1s, and eventually we also want to get it to be like crit multi and cast speed and spell damage. That'll be like super end game crafting, and I could look towards doing that. I haven't crafted too many wands, but that could be a fun little project to gain massive DPS. One thing I tried to make use of was the Coiling Whisper and the Soul Eater tech, but I just couldn't get the reduced hex duration enough to sustain the uptime. You know, we would require something like Windows of Opportunity and like the duration mastery and get all those reduced duration nodes near that, and that's just super far away from our current pathing. We could try something like using an Impossible Escape near Magebane to access those nodes, but it would switch up our build significantly. You know, we would have to find another way to get block cap, or we could change up Svalinn and go crit immune via Shaper Shield, and you know, change up our helmet and try to get more damage that way. There are like couple options, but I think, you know, just dropping the Coiling Whisper is, I think, better. I think trying to make it work would take a lot of effort, and I think it would start dropping some of the other core pieces of the build. But yeah, I've been, you know, pushing this build pretty heavily. I've been trying out some 16.5 maps and some tier 17 maps. I've been running some difficult scarabs, like Scarabs of the Wisps. I'm trying to, like, you know, overload the mods. I'm trying to run them with the increased effect. And basically what happens is, with our tanky setup, all the defensive mods on the maps make the map bosses and make some of the enemies very harder to clear. So trying to avoid all the defensive mods with the increased effects is what you want to try to prioritize on this tanky build. And on our DPS setup, it's completely the opposite, right? Like, we want to try to avoid any of the offensive mods that are like increased cast speed or increased damage. And, you know, we don't really care about the tanky map mods because our DPS is just so high that we'll just melt through anything. And that's what's really cool about the build, whether you are doing DPS setup to do some bossing or boss carries or invitation farming, or you want to take it back a little bit and do some mapping. You could switch to the tanky setup and run some mapping strategies that people come up with throughout the league. It's just, you know, choose your adventure type. And with PoE, that's like when it's the most fun, because now you get to try out different strategies, try out different aspects of the game, and having a build that allows you to switch between one or the other is really nice. And that pretty much wraps up the build update. To just summarize everything, we get high block, some crit immunity, some curse immunity. Mapping is really nice. We could definitely do some 16.5 maps. We could do some 17 maps. I have to figure out a little bit more what mods on some of these maps are best and bad for the build. But overall, it's been fun. You know, the next plan is to get Wine of the Prophet and see if we want to go into some tier 17 farming. Maybe I try Headhunter again with Svalinn, see how that feels. But yeah, those are some things that I want to go next week into the build with, and then after that maybe try something else. You know, I might try to put out some farming strategies, some things that I'm doing. I could also talk about my currency flipping, because, you know, that's what I do primarily to make a lot of currency. That could be an interesting video as well. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think of this tanky setup. Feel free to subscribe and like for some more content. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys later. Peace.